Hey, this is gonna be a long video, huh? Welcome everyone! Today I'm gonna do a tier list of every Gintama character, yes, even that one. I mean almost everyone. There are like 200 characters on this list, but it is possible I might have missed some. But no one major. And here are the rules, characters and tiers. Let me briefly explain how it's gonna work. So obviously I'm gonna rate those characters based on my personal preferences and that only. It doesn't matter how important a character is to upload or anything. If I like you, I'll place you high. If I don't like you, I'll place you low. Of course I would try not to put a character in a tier and refuse to elaborate. No, I would try to briefly explain why I like or dislike certain characters. But obviously with almost 200 characters I'll really try to keep it short. So if you would like me to expand my view on some of those characters, then you can simply comment the video and try to answer and expand why I liked or disliked a certain character. And here are the tiers and how they work. Starting from the bottom, we have extras. And here I'll put characters that I don't remember that much, were episodic or I just simply don't have an opinion on. Then we have F tier, characters so bad that they skipped E tier and made it to F tier directly. Then D tier, here I'll just put characters that I dislike or thought were boring, pretty much. As for C tier, if you're in here, I'm not quite sure if I like or dislike you. Overall, you're a character good enough to not be in D tier or below, but not good enough to be in B tier. And as for B tier, if you are here I simply like you. Then A tier, pretty similar, if you are here I like you, but you are also more than just an average likable character. Then we have S tier, here I'll put only characters I think are great overall and that I pretty much don't have that much issues with. As for the last one, we have top 5. Well, it speaks for itself, right? In here I'll put my 5 favorite characters. And in this tier, the order in which characters are placed actually matters. So you will find out who is my top 1. Well, that's it, let's get into it. Shige Shige. And let's start with Shogun. I think he's an overall good character, his comedic episodes are one of the best in the series, same goes for his more serious arcs of course. I kinda always liked how he never said anything in his own episodes, you know? He would always just appear, him or Matsudaira would declare why he is here, and then say nothing for the whole episode. While everyone around would get stressed and try to act in the most normal way, which obviously would end up in them doing the most ridiculous shit ever. I like Shige Shige and I think I'll put him in B tier. Yeah, for now I'll put him in B tier. He's the first character on the list, so it's kinda hard to place him. You know, later I will probably, you know, once I have a more general idea where each character is, it will be easier for me to put them, but as for now I'll put him in B tier. Soyo. And next up we have his daughter, Soyo. She may not have as much screen time and may not be the most important character overall, but I liked her. Especially her relationship with Kagura. Like in that one episode early on when Soyo escapes the castle and spends the whole day with Kagura, I think that one was pretty cool. Or even later when she organized a funeral for her. I'll put her in B tier. She's also overall nice, but maybe if she had a little bit more screen time before final arc started, then she would be a potential for A tier, but for now B. Maizou. Next up is Maizou, and he's kinda whatever. I think Courtesan of the Nation is one of the best arcs, but Maizou is not the reason why it's so good to me. He's fun, he's fine, but nor do I like him or dislike him, so that's C tier. Sada Sada. Well, and speaking of Courtesan of the Nation, next up we have Sada Sada, and as for him there are tons of interesting bits and pieces of information. The way he became Shogun, his backstory with Jiraiya, his relationship with Suzuran. For how little his screen time is, I think his background is really interesting and solid. And maybe if that background was explored a little bit more, maybe he would score even higher, but I think B tier is his limit as of now, but then again, putting him next to Shogun, you know what? I'll move Shige Shige up to A tier. I think he deserves that. You know, now that I think about it, I like Shige Shige much more than any other character in this tier. So, I think it's fine to move him. Nobu Nobu. And speaking of Shogun, next is Nobu Nobu, and I don't know. I always had this issue with him. Like his intro was strong. I liked him during the Shogun assassination arc, especially at the end when he appeared covered, you know, all bloody in bandages, being at his wit's end. But after that, he was kinda boring and I don't like his redemption arc at all. I think there was much more potential. Like before he became Shogun, he was an interesting character to me. After he became Shogun, he was whatever, so he will also end in whatever tier, which is C. Next up we have Shogun Killer. He's known for killing Shogun, and that's all I can say about him, so extras. Zenzou. Well, I think we have our first S tier character. If there was a top 10 tier, then he would easily end up in there. When it comes to Zenzou, I feel like I just can't bring myself to say anything negative. I love his comedy, I absolutely loved his role during the Shogun assassination arc, his role was huge there. And I'm glad he was the one that got to play it out. To me, he is a complete character and I can't put him anywhere below S. Definitely one of my favorite, and on a side note, I remember that during his very first episode he would kinda be like a rival to Gintoki and their every encounter would end up in a fight, and I thought that was pretty cool early on. Like, I had no idea, is he a good guy, is he a bad guy? He was kinda in the gray and I like that about him. Next up we have Zenzou's father, and you know, he seems like such an interesting character, but he never really was explored that much. And because of that, I can't think of any other tier but extras, you know, I legit have, like, I just have some bits and pieces of intel about him. That's not enough. Sarutobi. As for the next one, we have Sarutobi, and I feel like everything I've said about Zenzou could be said about Sarutobi, I guess except for one thing. I feel like she was never fully explored, and when the final arc started, I kinda felt like Sarutobi had nothing to do. And you know, in perspective, it's kinda weird that Zenzou wasn't as present in Gintama as Sarutobi was, yet his role was, you know, he had much more important role during final arcs than Sarutobi ever had, so... I mean, she was present, but her role was kinda unclear. Because of that, she will go to A tier. I still like her, I think her voice actor is great, by the way. She like perfectly captures her character and that yandere-like behavior. But I don't like her enough to put her in S. A is still good. Iga Ninjas and Shinobi 5. Okay, as for next characters, that's actually Iga Ninjas and Shinobi 5, and I'll be straight with you. That's a D tier, all of them. I always thought that for how much screen time they have and the fact that they are part of one of the most important arcs in Gintama, they feel like some kind of filler characters, you know? To be honest, they should be happy that they even made it to the list and they are not just an extras. All of them into D tier. Matsudaira. Okay, moving on, we actually have another goat on the list, and that's Matsudaira. You know, he would make it close to top 10, but not quite. I like him. I kinda wish he had a little bit more screen time, but oh well. But what I really like about Matsudaira overall is his relationship with Shogun. To me, it always looked like a, you know, like a father dropping off his son to school or something and then going out playing with his friends. But in this scenario, obviously Shogun is the son and Matsudaira is the father. And it was captured perfectly. He has a lot of cool moments, but sometimes he feels like a forgotten character. Overall still cool. I will put him in A, but that's like high A, almost S. As for his daughter, which is next, and Hamko, which is her daughter's friend, I'll put them both with extras. They are present here and there from time to time, but not enough for me to say anything, so you know, I'll just throw them there and move on. Kondo. And I will move on to Kondo, you know, one of my least favorite characters early on. And you know, by the end of the series, he became one of, maybe not my favorite, but definitely one of most likable. Kondo had a rough start, and if I were to rate him after like the first 30 episodes, I think that's F tier. However, after watching the whole Gintama, that's A tier, easily. As mentioned, he had a rough start, but as I kept watching, he became more and more likable. Definitely his stalker gags, which at first were pretty tiresome to me, finally began to make me laugh. His comedy and overall his character started to grow on me with each Shinsengumi focused arc, so I think A tier is definitely deserved. Hijikata. Next up we have Hijikata, and now a lot of issues that I had with Hijikata weren't really related to him as a character but to Shinsengumi overall. I had a lot of issues with defining Shinsengumi early on. I had no good idea of what they were supposed to be, but we are rating character here, not organization. And to be honest, with Hijikata individually, I don't think I ever had any issues. When I look at the list, it is pretty similar to Zenzou, everything about him, comedy, personality, his individual episodes. I think he's a really great character overall. I can't really bring myself to say anything negative about him. I could say something negative about Shinsengumi, but whatever, that's not what I'm trying to do here. He's definitely one of my favorite, and again, if there was a top 10 tier, he would easily end up here, S tier. Also perfect execution when it comes to him being a parody of one of the most strict people in Japan's history. Sogo. Next up on the list is Sogo, and I'm not sure. I mean, he is cool, but I never really did fall in love with him. I'm thinking about B tier, but let me think. Recently I have been rewatching a lot of early episodes, I mean like the first 40 to 50 episodes in Gintama, about that range. And almost every time I watch an episode and Sogo is in it, it feels as if I'm watching it for the first time. He really does feel forgettable early on, but I already talked about it in one of my previous videos. It took me quite some time to understand his character and his jokes, and that's partially my bad. Because of that, I'll move him to A. If I wouldn't rewatch some of those episodes, he would stay at B. But now that I understand his character a little bit more, those early episodes are definitely more enjoyable and he makes them more enjoyable. So yeah, I think A tier is... I think A tier is pretty solid here. Mitsuba. And speaking of Sogo, obviously next up is his sister, Mitsuba. Her arc is definitely one of my favorites. She is also the reason why I started to like Shinsengumi so much in the first place, and to be honest I kinda wish we could see more of her, but at the same time I think her death perfectly completes her arc. I'll go with the B tier. I do like her, but ultimately she is just a tool to develop Shinsengumi, especially Sogo. Nothing wrong with that, but kinda wish we could see more of her. As for her husband, which is next, Kuraba, it kinda felt like this arc needed a villain, so we got one, and he was pretty weak one, so I'll put him in D. He is nothing special. He's definitely, he definitely isn't the first character you think of when someone mentions Okita Mitsuba arc. Hajime Saito. As for the next character, which is Hajime, he got introduced so late into the story, and also his gag is a reused Elizabeth gag, of course. But somehow, even though his gag is reused one and he didn't have that much screen time, I think he still is a good character and a very funny one, especially when he is around Elizabeth. I'll give him B. I don't think there is much I can say about Hajime. He literally got introduced into the story right before, everything went down, so he didn't have that much time, but I think for how little screen time he has, he makes a pretty good use of it. So I think B is pretty good. Yamazaki. And I kind of feel like the next character is pretty much like Hajime. Next up we have Yamazaki. And here's the thing, I liked him from the start just because there's no particular reason why I liked him. But the thing about him and Hajime is that they never really do anything to make you fall in love with them. They are here, they are noticeable, they are likable, but they never go over that line of being the coolest character of the episode. So, my opinion about him stays the same throughout the whole series. He appeared, I liked him, and then I proceeded to like him for the rest of the series. Just a likable character, and I think that's B also. Tetsu, twice. And speaking of likable characters, okay, that wouldn't make much sense, but next up we have Tetsu, and I'll just start with saying that he is not a likable character. I think this is the first character that I'll put in the F tier. He's just a horrible character to me, really one of the worst ones. There was generally nothing likable about him to me. I mean, there was, and that is before his whole big change. Back when he was a punk and a rapper, back then he was an C tier character, That's why I have him twice on my list, because, those are completely two different characters. If I were to combine them, they would be in D, but I decided to go with just two copies. His C tier version was someone I was actually interested in, but that interest quickly died. Tetsu is such a waste of screen time character to me. He never really contributes. I can't even remember his jokes after his whole glow up. To be honest, let's just move on. Ito. And let's move to another Shinsengumi member and another B tier, I think. Next up we have Ito. He was alright, his arc was definitely good, but I never really liked how, in my eyes at least, he easily switched sides at the end. I obviously understand why he did it, but I don't know, I guess I was expecting something else, but he's overall good, really neat, but not enough to make it to A tier, so yeah, I think I'll go with B, just like I've said. And with Ito out of the way, that's almost it for Shinsengumi, except 3 more characters, and I actually had to Google their names. We have Kamiyama, Harada, Kumanaku. Those guys, I feel like they have enough screen time to say something about them, anything, but even though they appear pretty often, like pretty much every time Shinsengumi is doing something, I feel like they never end up doing anything impressive, so I'll just put them in C tier. All of them. They are fine, but kind of whatever at the end of the day. You don't remember much of them. I mean, I legit had to Google their names, so C tier is max. Isaburo. And now we have white Shinsengumi. Obviously, I'm talking about Mimawari Gumi. And the first one to go is Isaburo. And you know what I really liked about him? That he didn't overstay his welcome. He was introduced kinda late into the story. He didn't have that much screen time, but he used every minute of it. I really like that he died. It may sound weird, but in my eyes, it just completes his character. That's much better than giving him a whole redemption arc, at least I think so. Once his role was done, they got rid of him, and I'm cool with that. And because of that, I'm gonna put him in A. You know, if anything, it's too bad he got introduced so late. Otherwise, he would probably have much more screen time during some more comedic arcs, and, you know, maybe he would be in S. But you never know, maybe I would hate him and his comedy, and maybe he would drop to B. Who knows? But I'm still good with what we got. Nobume. And on the other hand, we have Nobume, which is next in line, and here I have completely opposite impressions. You know, I just finished talking about overstaying your welcome, and I feel like that's exactly what Nobume did. I think she was a much more interesting character back when Isaburo was still alive, and once he was gone, I don't know, it just felt like Nobume became a completely different character. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with characters changing their perspective or anything, but aside from her gags, it just felt like everything else about her was different. I think her relationship with Gintoki was her biggest highlight to me. I think that was cool. And she was also part of that trio of Sada's sister, whatever, you know, the one with Kagura and Soyo. I think that was pretty cool. I'll put her in C. I preferred when she was portrayed as an antagonist, and I kinda wish it stayed that way, but you know, it's not like I hate her. I'll put her in C. Kozenigata and Haji. And now moving on to the final police unit, we have Kozenigata and Haji. As for Kozenigata, it feels like his whole character kinda resolved around one gag, but to be honest, it was pretty funny to me on multiple occasions. It's like, you know, I just like him, and that's pretty much it. I'll put him in B. And as for Haji, I think I'll put her below Kozenigata in C tier. I feel like she was a nice addition, but obviously her character existed so that Kozenigata had a partner. Nothing really special about her individually. Aesamon and Ikeda. Anyway, moving on, next up we have Aesamon and Ikeda, and I'll just put them both in D tier first, because there is no way they deserve to be anywhere else. They are just... I feel like they're just really boring. There is nothing special about them when I think about them. Even their arc is also whatever, apart from its ending, of course. Other than that, it's like both their arc and their characters are just very ordinary, both of them. So yeah, let's just move on. Binbokusai. And we're gonna move on to, that's the beginning of Yagyuu Family, and the first one is Binbokusai. I think he's fine. His design is goofy, he has a couple of goofy episodes, but I don't know. Overall, I don't know. I feel like there is not enough about him to put him anywhere but C. He's a right character, but you know, you barely see him, so... just like you barely see Koshinori, which is next, and which is extras. Let's move on to... to Yagyuu Family retainers, which are also extras. Aside from one of them, of course. And that's gonna be Tojo. I like how he and Kyuubei were like an imitation of Kondo and Otae, but done in a more interesting, at least in my eyes, way. But at the end of the day, I think Kondo had more to offer than just comedy. So Tojo will end up in a tier below him, B tier. And then we have this lovely lady, which is gonna be in extras. Yeah. And then, I'm prepared for this one. Next up, we have Jugem Jugem, Unko Nageki, Ototoi, no Shinchan, no Pantsu Shinpachi, no Jinsei, Barumunku, Fezarion, Aizaku, Shunaida, Sanbun no Ichi no Junjo, Na Kanjo no Nokota, Sanbun no Niwa Sakamuke ga Niki ni Naru, Kanjo Uragiri wa Boku no Namae wo Shiteiru, Yuda Shinrai no wo Boku wa Shiteiru Rusa Surume Medaka, Kazunoko ko Edame Medaka, Kono Medaka wa Saki to Chigau Yatsu dakara Ike no Medaka no Hou dakara Rayu Yutei Miyo Kimouko, Pepe 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 Bichigusomaru. C tier. Yagyuu Kyuubei. Anyway, moving on to Jugem's owner, and that's Kyuubei. It's finally time for the first character that will make it into my personal top 5 tier. Yes, Kyuubei is easily one of my favorite. Everything about her is just great. The way she switches between that masculine and feminine personality, how her relationship with Otaya is played out, her gag of throwing men over her shoulder, yeah, even simple things like that, even her voice actor. In general, I feel like she is one of the most unique characters in Gintama. Kinda wish she had more screen time during final arcs, but well, that's too bad. She is also the reason the Bubble Tower episode exists, so that alone puts her above C tier. I feel like since her introduction arc, she has remained to be one of my favorites, so that spot among the top 5 is easily earned. Otaya. And speaking of Kyuubei, it's only natural that the next one is obviously Otaya. And here I have a mixed feelings here, because at first I liked her, but to be honest, all of her gags grew pretty old on me quickly. And I feel like there's only one thing that saved her from falling into C, now that I think about it. It was her relationship with Kondo, but you know, I'm not talking about all the jokes. I'm talking about how mature it suddenly becomes during the Farewell Shinsengumi arc. I'll be honest, that was unexpected to me, that their relationship would ever be showcased in such way. You know, it was treated as a joke for over 300 episodes and suddenly it got all serious. And I think it was pretty cool. Because of that, I think I'll give her B tier. I feel like there was potential for more, but as I've said, most of her gags got old pretty quick, so... next in line we have a bunch of Otaya's friends. And the first one is Oryu, and there's not much to say about her. But as a fun fact, I can tell you that she is based on the real-life Sakamoto's wife. That's why Sakamoto keeps hitting her up, but other than that, that's C tier. She had some episodes early on, if you remember, but then she was kind of forgotten. Forgotten just like Anne and, to be honest, Mona. But here it's a little bit different than it was with Oryu. I will put them in D tier, because I never liked that whole plot twist with Sadaharu and Altana in the final. I was also surprised both of them were gone for like 300 episodes and suddenly they are the key to the victory. I think that was pretty weak, and yeah, there's nothing likable about them to me. Yeah, just D tier. And they will be joined there by their dog, Komaku. I mean, I guess he was the key to the victory, not Anne and Mona. But really, the idea behind them all was, I don't know, it just felt like Sorachi was bringing back all the characters for the final, and they had to have some kind of role, so there you go. As for the last Otaya's friend, we have Hanako, and her case is pretty similar to Oryu. Had some episodes early on, if you remember, but then was kind of forgotten. And just like Oryu, she will end up in C tier. Hime Kada. And now we are moving on to 4 devas, and the first to go is Hime Kada. To be honest, I don't have much to say about her. I appreciate her role as a villain in the 4 Divas arc, and based on that I will put her in B tier, I think? Yeah, in B tier. I guess her next episode, how, you know, she's gambling in her cell is also cool. I kinda wish her race, Shinra, was more developed, but yeah, maybe then she would score higher. Jirocho. Moving on to next Deva, we have Jirocho, and I think for someone who I thought would be yet another episodic antagonist, Jirocho for a change felt like an actual character. That his character was written with an idea other than just being evil for the sake of being evil. That's not the case here. Also, his redemption arc feels earned rather than forced, you know how it usually feels. Definitely a breath of fresh air in the world of Gintama as antagonists, at least in my eyes, and because of that I'll put him in A. I guess it was also cool to see him again during the Silver Sword arc, but overall a well-written character. As for his daughter, Chinpirako, I think her case is actually pretty similar, but with one issue. I feel like she got sidelined a lot once the story started focusing more and more on Jirocho as an antagonist. I don't have anything against it, I like Jirocho after all, so it's fine, but you know, because of that I kinda lost interest in Chinpirako and would rather learn more about Jirocho, and because of that B tier is the best I can think of, but overall she's fine, just nothing really special. Maybe if the focus stayed on her and didn't switch to Jirocho, then maybe she would score higher, who knows. Katsuo. And to finish topic of Jirocho and his gang, next is Katsuo, and to be honest he's kinda whatever. I don't even remember that much of him. He has a fine amount of screen time, but it feels like he never is a highlight of episodes he stars in. I'll give him C tier. Let's just move on. Mother. Move on to Mother. And you know, you may call me crazy, but I already know what I'm about to say. And you know what? That's A tier. This character is so easy to understand. Everything about her seems so familiar. Just an image of a typical concerned mother, but stretched to be over the top. For a pretty much joke character, she leaves such a good impression in my head, you know? And her jokes are genuinely funny. I'm gonna put her in A. If you don't really remember her, you should definitely rewatch those episodes. Host Club. After Mother we have her son, and actually we have all the hosts. Kyoshiro, Hachiro, and that third one. You know, to be honest, all the hosts are going straight to C tier. Even though, you know, it feels like even though they have such a good amount of episodes, and you know those episodes are focused around them, I feel like they are never really the reason why those episodes are good, you know? So, you know, C tier, the whatever arc, the whatever tier, they are kinda whatever. Saigo. And now to finish there's one more after Saigo, which is now. As for Saigo, you know, just overall likable character, at least in my eyes. I'll give him B. You know, I feel like there's not much I can say about him, but he's just likable, and that's it about him. Also, without him, I guess we wouldn't have Pako and Zurako, so that counts for something, right? And before we move on to the actual last Deva, there is Azumi, and I feel like everything I've said about hosts can be said here, so also C tier. Otose. And now we are moving to the actual final Deva, and that's Otose. I think she's one of the most wholesome characters in the series. Otose may not seem like it at first, but literally everyone she surrounds herself with, she treats them like a part of one big family. And throughout the series that family is getting bigger and bigger with, you know, Tama and Kagura, and, you know, obviously Catherine. I think that throughout the entire series you will never really see her talk to a character that she doesn't consider a part of that family. She will always be present, but will interact only with those she holds dear, and I think that trait of hers is what makes her character so good to me. That's another S tier. I can't recall a single time Otose managed to do something that would make me dislike her, you know? That mix of motherly aura and strictness, while beneath that she truly cares about everyone around her, I think that's what does it for me. As for her husband, which is next, that's extra, so you can't really say much about Daigo. He is there, but yeah, not enough. And while at the topic of old people, next up is Oiwa. I mean, she's a JoJo reference, so that's at least B, right? And while still at the topic of old people, next up is Otohime. I don't know, man. I think the Ryugujo arc overall is pretty weak. Definitely not my favorite. And as for her, she was pretty boring, and to be real, the same goes for her, you know, the Kamenashi guy. They both go to D tier. The whole arc, to be honest, was... The arc was good until they started playing a major role in it, so, you know, that speaks for itself. Catherine. Anyway, now we have Catherine. You know, my issue with Catherine is that I like her, but at the same time, you can tell that, you know, she was created so that Otose has a supporting character around her. You know, like Catherine would always do or say something that would trigger a reaction from Otose, but never do or say something that would expand her character individually. You know, she had like, what, in total 2 episodes focused around her. She's still fine and I don't mind her. I'll put her in B. Gengai. And coming back to the topic of old people, next we have Gengai. Let me start with his design because, you know, he looks like this mad scientist type of character and I absolutely love it about him. Also his gag, you know, him modifying everything with some most useless features like the ability to shoot soy sauce. Yeah, sure, that will come in handy one day. I don't know what to tell you, he's one of those that there's just nothing to complain about. And those end up in S tier on this list, so that's where he's going. But seriously though, I feel like I just like those older characters in Gintama. They may not have much action going on, but they are overall cool characters. And Gengai is definitely one of them. Noriko. And so is Noriko, but you know, she isn't necessarily old. Do you even remember Noriko? Who was she? I do. And here's the thing, when Noriko appeared for the first time, I really fell in love with her character, you know? I was like, oh, nice, they introduced a new character and I like her, that's cool. Can't wait to see more. And so I was waiting for her to show up again, only to later learn that she was an episodic character written by a winner of some kind of contest, you know, for writing new character for the show. And the winner was a guy who wrote Noriko, so I guess congrats. I'm not surprised you won. She had a very interesting condition where she needed to stay in constant motion and have the wind in her face, otherwise she would start coughing up blood and possibly even die. I would love to see how Sorachi uses that condition, you know, in some other scenarios. If you don't remember Noriko, you should definitely go and revisit that episode. As for this tier list, that's I think A tier, right next to Mother, you know, 2 episodic characters who made the most of their limited screen time. Tama. Next up we have Tama, but I actually had to think there for a longer while. Before I put her anywhere, I feel like there already are some characters on this list where you just look at them, at their tier, and you know exactly why they are here, you know? There are some characters in Gintama, like I could just drop a name and you more or less know exactly in which tier they would end up, you know? Like, let's drop a name, Akatsura. Like, you in your head already know where he's gonna be placed on your tier list, right? And I feel like with Tama, I could do the same with Tama. You know, I'm gonna drop a name, Tama. Where she is on your list. On mine, she's gonna be in D tier. I'm joking, she's gonna be in S tier. And here's the thing, I just can't really explain, you know, I would have to take my time here, but I just think she's a very, very good character. The way Sorachi plays around with her being a robot and, you know, not always being capable of understanding humans, you know, it doesn't sound like something, you know, we've never seen before or anything like that. It's pretty common in movies, in anime in general, in other media, right? Characters like that, like robots that can't really understand humans. But I think in Gintama it just feels natural, you know? There is no... I think it's due to the fact that Tama is the robot, you know, that as a fact isn't pointed at every 5 seconds. 90% of the time characters will treat her as an actual human being, even when she's doing like the most absurd things you could imagine robots doing, right? In that one scene when she is there to collect rent from Gintoki and ends up blowing up the front door, I think it wouldn't be really as funny if it was Otose or Catherine, you know, blowing up the front door. I am gonna end up putting her in S tier because I just think, you know, I just think she deserves it. It may sound weird, but I just think Tama deserves to be in S tier. Well, let's move on before I start moving in circles. And we are actually moving on to characters from Fuyo arc. And, you know, I'm starting with those 2 robots. You know, I think I kind of have the same thoughts about them. I feel like a lot of people sleep on Fuyo arc, by the way, but it may be due to the fact that it's placed between Benizakura and Yagyuu arcs. And, you know, Fuyo arc gets kind of overshadowed by them. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, that's the kind of characters Gintama needs in those shorter arcs. There is more to their personality than just being evil or good. There is more to them than just thoughts of taking over the world or some shit like that. I'll put them in B tier both, because they're just enjoyable to watch on screen, and if you don't remember much from Fuyo arc, then you should for sure rewatch it. And okay, I see that the next characters are, you know, also from Fuyo arc, but it's Ryuzan and Fuyo, and you know, it's kind of like rating the same characters because, you know, those robots are based on them. So I'll just put them in extras to not double my, you know, choices. Next up we have, actually next 3 characters are related to Tama more or less. We have that bald guy from Fuyo arc, that king guy and that demon guy from Tama Quest arc. Yeah, the Tama Quest arc. To me, those 3 together, they're kind of the opposite of what I've said about those 2 robots from Fuyo arc. They are kind of like, we know, we need an antagonist, so they just ended as one. And I don't really like that. I'll throw them all into D tier. I think that's the kind of issue with Gintama when I look at this list. Every now and then we have those new characters that show up, it turns out they are antagonists, and before we have any chance of knowing them better, they're already defeated and gone forever. That obviously doesn't apply to every single episodic antagonist, after all we have characters like Ito in B tier, or, you know, those robots I've talked about from Fuyo arc in B tier, so you know, but I think it does apply to lots of them. Gintoki. And now we are finally moving to Gintoki. I may be going a little bit over the board with that, but I think Gintoki could be the best shonen protagonist ever. There is just no bullshit with him. He isn't some kind of hero, chosen one, destined to free this world from Amanto, you know, the usual. No, he's just a guy who lost almost everything during war. He lost his teacher, probably his parents, we don't know, but you know, it's kinda easy to assume. His friends, everything. But what makes him different from every other protagonist is that he actually moved on. He got over it. He isn't trying to get revenge or be the hero. He usually accidentally becomes one because, you know, he usually just gets mixed into some things. I mean, that's what his business is all about, so, you know, while he's at it, he's just doing the right thing. But very often, he's also doing the wrong thing. You know, he's selfish, lazy, I guess broke, and never really does anything about it. He's addicted to gambling, usually rude to other people, and, you know, like what else? I could go on and on. But what I'm trying to say is, finally, there is a protagonist who isn't ideal. Sorachi isn't afraid to play around with Gintoki, he's gonna showcase him as a scumbag, why not? If the situation calls for it, well, why not? And Gintoki will act as a complete asshole if he has to. Basically, he will showcase all those traits that other protagonists would never do. And that's what's great about him to me. He's different, but not just for the sake of being different. He's different because he has human traits. He has some bad habits that he doesn't try to fix because, you know, that's how humans are most of the time, right? He's aware of some of his imperfections and, you know, he just accepts them. Instead of shaking the entire universe to become the perfect being, he's just fine with it. I've noticed that people will often say that he is a parody of shonen protagonists. I mean, he is, but I would say that he is a parody of our ordinary human being. Us. Whenever I see someone say that Gintoki is their favorite character, 90% of the time the reason is not because he is cool or super strong, has some crazy technique or jutsu or whatever. Most of the time they just see themselves in him, and that's huge. It's something very difficult to achieve. And of course, the protagonist will always end up being the most popular and likable character by the audience, and Gintama is no different. But here I feel like it's for completely different reasons if we compare Gintoki with other protagonists and reasons why they are so popular. By now you probably know, but yes, obviously Gintoki is going to my top 5 and is taking that first place. Kintoki. But you know what? That's actually not over about Gintoki, because the next one is Kintoki. And you know what was always funny to me about Kintoki? He's literally considered to be an evil Gintoki. And you know what kind of evil deeds evil Gintoki commits? Well, let's think for a second. He pays his rent on time. He's overall nice guy whom the whole Edo loves and adores. He's reliable and puts someone else's well-being above his own. What a piece of shit, right? Honestly though, great idea for a character, and that only adds to what I have already said about Gintoki being a literal opposite of what you would expect from a shonen protagonist. That's A tier, like a very high A tier, almost S tier, but not quite there because I don't really like how his character was handled toward his own arc, you know? And while at the topic of Gintoki's parodies, next one is Pakuyasa. To this day, I can't believe he's actually real. Amazing. B tier. Moving on to yet another parody of Gintoki, but I mean not really, but we have that family with a baby, you know? And I'll be honest, there is only one character that I can say anything about, and it's the kid, who I put in B tier, and the rest will go to extras. I think this whole mini arc was really funny, and the baby created a lot of funny scenarios to put Gintoki in. Overall, he may not be individually the most interesting character or whatever, but you know, he's just a baby, and just his presence alone was enough to create some of those scenarios, so that's an earned B tier. Hanano Ana. Moving on, now we have Ketsuno Ana and... that's the other Ana, but yeah, next one is Ketsuno Ana. Anyway, Hanano Ana. She's actually cool. I always thought of her as a parody of a TV reporter that has to deal with some of the most absurd shit and maintain that fake smile on the air no matter what. While Hanano Ana is literally the opposite, and very often loses her temper. Not sure if that was the idea, but it doesn't matter. That's a B tier. You know, perfect execution of an idea. I don't even know if that was the actual idea, but if it was, perfect execution. If it wasn't, I guess still perfect execution. Ketsuno Ana. And now we are actually moving to Ketsuno Ana, and you know, let me just start with saying that nothing about her was ever appealing to me. Like, To me, she always was just a crush for Gintoki, and I was surprised she even had her own arc. And to be honest, I kinda wish she never had that arc. I mean, every single character from that arc was so boring. Like, the arc itself was so meh. And listen, you know what? They're actually all next to each other. I will throw them all into D. I mean, all of them. Like that, you know, all those characters from that arc. I mean, Ketsuno Ana, that antagonist guy, and Semi guy, whatever his name was, definitely that Shikigami girl, I don't even remember her name, that's extras. There is also Geromaru. I'm not sure here. It's not like I don't like her, I just don't like her arc, but you know what? She will go to C. Then there's Pandemonium, and you know what? I'll be honest. She feels like an actual highlight of this arc. And when a character like Pandemonium feels like a highlight, that's just how bad the entire thing was. I will also throw her into C. But okay, maybe actually let's slow down. I kinda rushed things here. But you know, that's it. I would just rather talk about someone else. The only character here that actually feels interesting in any way is Geromaru. But even then, I think after that arc, she appears again in like, what, 2 episodes, and later on in the Silver Soul arc, she shows up at the end. I don't know, C tier is reasonable. She's just a victim of this whole arc, Kagura. Anyway, moving on to an actual likable character, Kagura. Man, what a banger of a character. She goes straight into top 5 right between those two. How have the things I have said about Gintoki apply to Kagura when it comes to her role as a main heroine? Perfect parody and execution of that trope. As a female character in anime overall, she is such a breath of fresh air. And so is Kyuubei, but when it comes to Kagura, episodes focused on her are just unforgettable. To this day, I think that the Umbrella episode is genuinely one of the best episodes in Gintama. You know, overall, when you look at all those little stories in her episodes, they are so simple when you think about it, yet presented in a perfect way. Just like the mentioned Umbrella episode, it's not like it's some kind of a peak of story writing or anything. No, it's all about the execution. And to top it off, her personality, jokes, her relationship with all those characters, you know, Zura, Sogo, or, you know, the mentions Princess Soyo, are written in a really unique way, which just makes her even more special. Especially that brother and sister relationship she has with Gintoki. Like, you know, you can't recreate that anywhere else. Also, like, and not to mention her voice actor, her design, like everything about her is just perfect. Well earned place in top 5. Also, let's not forget she was the first one to call Hasegawa Madao, so I mean, that means something. Also, remember that if you're having a bad day, just remember that someone uploaded Kagura's singing compilation to YouTube, and it's free. Sadaharu. Okay, that's Saigo-san, he shouldn't be here. That's extras. Anyway, moving on to the next character, which is Sadaharu. I mean, it's only natural he is here, right, after talking about Kagura. Now, there's just something about Sadaharu that can't quite be explained, you know, it's something similar to what I've talked about when I was rating Tama. Sadaharu is so goofy. There are so many jokes around Sadaharu, and they all come down to him just being on the screen and looking goofy, you know? Like, there is that one scene with Katsura and Sadaharu, I can't get this scene out of my head. There is that one scene when Katsura knocks on the door to Yorozuya and Sadaharu is the one to answer and open the door. It just makes me laugh for whatever reason. There are tons of scenes like that throughout the whole Gintama. And there are tons of scenes like that with Sadaharu throughout the whole Gintama where, you know, Sadaharu is just there. He's not doing anything funny, he's just there. I'm putting him in A tier. For whatever reason he is funny, and maybe he can't speak, but you know, he speaks through his actions, and that's enough for me to understand his character. Shinpachi. And finishing with the last Yorozuya member, Shinpachi. You know, I'm just gonna say that first, like, sorry to all Shinpachi fans, but I think you're not gonna like what I'm about to say. If there was ever a character in Gintama that I at some point was tired of, it definitely was Shinpachi. Now, here's the thing. Shinpachi isn't a badly written character. There is a lot to him. His personality, individual episodes are not bad. He has developed, and there's a lot we could talk about, you know, when speaking about his development. I am pretty sure I'm like one of 10 people that thought Otsu's arc was very good. You know, that and Shinpachi is a big part of it, so I mean that means something. However, beneath all of that, there is one thing Shinpachi is known for best, and at the same time it became an issue that was never fixed, for me obviously. And I'm talking about him being a straight man. At first it was funny, after like 100 episodes it became, you know, a part of him, and you know, I kind of accepted that, okay, this is him. That's how he reacts, that's his personality. But after another 100 episodes and then another, I just grew tired of it. To the point of being annoyed at times. If I were to rate Shinpachi based on the first 100 episodes, that would easily be A if not S tier. But right now, you know, for a second I even thought of D tier, but I just can't forget all the things I have liked about him, so let's not be too crazy here. D tier seems very unfair. The final verdict is C tier. At first I liked him, then he was kind of whatever, then he straight up annoyed me at times. I think he has too many recurring gags that are repeated too often. They were repeated so much that at some point you just knew they were gonna happen. And I guess we can all agree that part of Gintama's charm is comedy when you least expect it. And that unfortunately can't be said about Shinpachi later on. Obi. And okay, this is kind of funny because the next character is very close to Shinpachi and I also don't have anything nice to say about him, I think. I mean, yeah, of course, no, I don't have anything nice to say about him. Obi Hajime. Jesus Christ, man, his arc might be my least favorite in the entire show. It's kinda crazy how it goes from Courtesan of the Nation to this Star Wars arc, and it was so weak. I kinda don't even remember what it even was about, because I think I just wanted to erase it from my memory, and you know, I was successful. Obi is F tier. There are some bits and pieces that I remember about him, but it's nothing nice, just negative things, so let's move on. And okay, I already see we are moving to kinda extras, you know, 3 extras characters that, you know, those 2 Shinpachi's pen pals and Eromes. You know, I could say something about them, but at the end of the day, they are extras, so let's just put them there and move on. Otsu. I guess let's move on to someone I actually like, and you know, it's Otsu. I think Otsu is one of the greatest parodies of idols ever. I mean, her parody is like a parody of an over-the-top parody of an idol. And I think her lyrics prove that. I'm actually surprised, but I know there are a lot of people that don't like Otsu and are glad she doesn't have that much screen time later on. But I am not one of them. Maybe her not appearing that much is the reason why. You know, she has just enough screen time to make her character still feel fresh, to not overdo it with her songs and gags. I really like the idea behind her character and I like the execution, and that's enough to make it to A tier. Moving to another idol, which is Bichi from Galaxy Kingdom Bitches 48. And, you know, here I think Sorachi went a little overboard here with some jokes, but they were still funny. The joke here was pretty similar to what Sorachi did with Otsu, but the execution was still successful in my eyes. That's B tier, cause as an episodic joke it was a hit to me. I still think he kinda went over the board with some, you know, jokes about idols, but at the end of the day, they were hits, so I'm fine with them, I guess. And speaking of parodies, next we have Takatin and Takachin, and you know what? Let me just put them both in one tier and make it simple. I'm gonna put them in B tier. We are still in the Otsu environment, and you know, while she is a parody of an idol, Takatin and Takachin are both parodies of what an average idol fan looks like. And the joke here is that an average fan looks like Takatin and nothing like Takachin. And the same goes for their behavior. Let me be straight, I just like the entire environment around Otsu, her being parody of an idol, her fan club being a parody of an idol fan club. I just think this whole thing is done in a well-thought manner, which makes me like it, and B tier here, I don't think like that's an over-exaggeration. And to finish the topic of Otsu, next up we have Tamo-san and Otsu parents, and you know, just extras. Out of those 3, I could go and say something about Otsu's mother, but I don't really have an opinion about her, so I mean, just extras, all of them. I see who is coming, and you know, next we have manga artists, and god, I'm gonna throw them all into D tier immediately. Let me make it clear. All those episodes about Gintaman, writing manga, drawing manga, like whatever, all those episodes, I just remember them being very boring and complaining about them. And I know, you know, I'm gonna throw Sorachi in there as well. I know he isn't part of those episodes, but you know what? he is the one that created them, so he should join them. Anyway, moving on, we have Santa and his reindeer. And you know, this right here is exactly your image of Santa Claus in the world of Gintama. When I got to watch those Christmas episodes for the first time, that's exactly what I thought Santa would look like. So, I mean, nice execution, B, both of them. And then we have that gambler guy from one episode. You know, the premise was nice, but you know, his episodic never used again. So, extras. And same goes for that cat. I don't really remember him. I think I need to rewatch his episode because, you know, I'm gonna throw him his extras because I just don't remember him. Hedoro. But I for sure do remember Hedoro, and you know what? He's a weird ass character. I will give him B tier because I do like him, however, sometimes I wonder what Sorachi had in mind when he was writing Hedoro. Like, what's his purpose outside of the Silver Soul arc? I don't know, maybe someday I'll find that answer, but I don't think his comedy was enough for him to end up in B, especially in that Silver Soul arc, but outside of that I always thought what was his actual purpose. And the same could be said about Kappa and, you know, that guy, I don't remember him really. I mean, I remember Kappa, but I don't remember, I mean, I remember Kappa, but I don't remember his episode, or her episode, so I'll put them both in extras. And you know what, it's kind of funny because next characters, like I see them, I know their episode, you know, this is this Yakuza group, whatever. I remember that episode about Storeroom, but I can't remember their characters. So I will also put them in extras because I just don't have opinions about them. There are a lot of episodes I should rewatch, and maybe that Storeroom episode is one of them. Like, I remember the plot, I remember a lot about this episode, but I don't remember those characters. Kidomaru. Thankfully, I remember next character and his episode. I remember both of those things. And, you know, I'm talking about Kidomaru. He's one of the very early characters, but I thought his history and the whole deal with the underground arena was cool. And, you know what, I was kind of surprised to find out he died. I thought he would be another character that, you know, joins the cast and would reappear from time to time and, you know, other episodes, but you know, he died and it turned out he was only episodic character. I'll still put him in B though. I liked him. I liked him, and too bad we couldn't see more of him. And speaking of episodic characters, next three characters are also episodic, but you know, one of them is this girl that thought Sogo killed her father because, you know, Sogo's a bad guy, but I don't remember her much. I'll put her in extras, but I do remember this guy. And this is another case of antagonist because we needed an antagonist, you know, I'm evil because I'm evil. And that's a D tier on my list, at least. And the same goes for the next character, which is Senbei. And I remember him because I watched that episode recently, but other than that, I wouldn't remember him. But he's another antagonist because we needed an antagonist. Also D tier. I mean, both of them are just whatever, there is nothing to talk about. Okay, I guess there are actually two more episodic characters. It's Kintaro and Jero, I think his name was. And you know, I remember their episodes, their story was fine, I remember it, but their characters are nothing special really. At least I guess at least there was some kind of idea behind them. I'll give them both C tier because, you know, they're whatever. I don't really have an opinion about them. Tatsumi, Tetsuko, and Tetsuya. But I guess I do have an opinion about the next one. And you know what, actually about the next three, because their case is pretty similar to me, and that's also, and with them we'll also finish off the Edo residence part of the list. We have Tatsumi, Tetsuko, and Tetsuya left, and I will keep it simple. I think all of them are fine as characters, but I feel like something is missing. That doesn't really apply to Tetsuya, since, you know, he died pretty early, but Tatsumi and Tetsuko, it seems like they were forgotten. Am I the only one? Their intros are strong, and there is a good setup for more, but nothing ever is really done with it. I like them both, but not enough to put them in B. I'll put them in C, like high C, because I think there's just too much of a wasted potential in them. Tetsuya will also go to C, because, I mean, he was fine, there was some idea, he just didn't buy me as a character, and, you know, he dies pretty soon, so there's that. Takasugi. Moving on to some more relevant characters now, we finally have Takasugi. And that's the tough one for me, you know? Takasugi has been perfect for almost the entire run. To me, it is kinda crazy for a character like him to exist in Gintama's world in the first place, because, you know, he doesn't have a single comedic episode. I'm like 99% sure that he himself never appears in those. There are some characters that, you know, cosplay as him and try to pretend to be him, like, you know, there's that one episode where Takasugi is voiced over by Prince Hata voice actor, but you never see the real Takasugi, and you never see the real Takasugi do something silly like any other character does. And you know, I'm always the first person to say that, you know, hey guys, you know, Gintama isn't just a comedy about dicks, it's something much more. But even though I say that a lot, I think creating character and completely excluding him from a comedy, which is, you know, like a huge part of Gintama, while at the same time making him the main villain, was a really good move. Thanks to that, he never lost that aura, let's go with that word. So there was a crazy amount of tension when he finally showed up during the Shogun assassination arc. Now, throughout the whole story, especially after the Benizakura arc, Takasugi would randomly show up here and there, but he was always plotting something, gathering forces, deceiving others, like permanently in the shadows. And then the Shogun assassination arc started, and let's be honest, everyone and their mother was waiting for that encounter with Gintoki. You know, while we are at it, let me just say, it is crazy how much other shonens have to rely on power systems, new techniques, final forms, all that, and Gintama is able to avoid it all easily by just making characters feel real. When Takasugi fights Gintoki, you can almost feel that they hate and love each other at the same time. You know, they are not only fighting each other, they're also fighting, you know, like with themselves. You're experiencing like a real life conflict. But despite all that, there really is something that I just really disliked about Takasugi, especially during the final, and that's his redemption arc. I feel like I'm the only one that didn't like it. I think it all just happened so fast. You know, I'm not against the idea of Takasugi ending up as a good guy, especially after Utsuro is revealed, but you know, suddenly there is this guy Utsuro, and you know, he's taking over your role as the main villain while you go and join the good guys now. I think I just wish there was something in between Takasugi losing to Gintoki and Utsuro being introduced. At least a few extra scenes with Takasugi going over what happened, or you know, something like that. But I mean, obviously he was on death's bed, so we couldn't get his perspective at the time. Listen, I'm not sure myself about his ranking. I feel like A. He is a very plot heavy character, so unfortunately here I can't rely on his comedy or anything to boost his ranking. But let me say something. If there was a tier between S and A, he would be there, because today I feel like he is A, but tomorrow I could feel like he is S. At the end of the day, my ranking of him doesn't really matter. Even if I were to put him in D, obviously I'm not gonna do this, he is still a great character, and Gintama wouldn't be the same if Takasugi wasn't part of it. Nizo. As for the next Kiheitai member, you know, here's the thing, next one is Nizo, and he is the kind of character that I never really had any expectations from, yet he somehow exceeded all of them. I wish Gintama had more antagonists like that, you know? Ones that would at least make a brief appearance in some other episodes before their final showdown, cause usually with antagonists it's like they show up and in the very same arc or even episode they either die or stop being an antagonist. While with Nizo it was nice to just randomly introduce him during some irrelevant arc and to later use Nizo again as the main antagonist during the Benizakura arc. Like, he already had a one fight with Gintoki during that arc with a kid that looked like Gintoki. So I really like that he was reused for Benizakura arc. Because, you know, there's already some kind of history between them, right? There is some tension. So Benizakura arc doesn't have to start over, doesn't have to introduce him or any other new character, build his character. Instead, it can develop what we already know and have. If you look at this list, especially D tier right now, like 50% of that tier are antagonists who were introduced and defeated in the same arc or episode. That says something. To me, Nizo feels complete. And for him to die, I mean, he was pretty self-destructive, so that was the only option, I guess. You know, that death just completes his tale. I would put him in S tier, and, you know, okay, let me cover up for my ass, because I just did put Takasugi in A. Let me put it that way. On paper, I think Takasugi is 10 times the character that Nizo ever was, but in my very personal opinion, I liked Nizo more and had way less issues with him than I did with Takasugi. That's why I'll put him in S and keep Takasugi in A, at least for now. Bansai. Moving to the last, I mean, not the last Kiheitai member, but the last Kiheitai member that I like, and You know, I feel like everyone likes Banzai. He kinda fits the description of what I talked about when rating Nizo. I'm talking about him during the Itou arc. I think adding him there and forcing him into a fight with Gintoki was a smart move, because, you know, he never really again had that chance, so that was pretty cool. And it's pretty much the same what I've said about Nizo and Benizakura arc. You know, Banzai was there, we already knew something about him, all that was left was to expand on that, and that's exactly what happened during Itou arc, and it worked perfectly. Wish we could see more of that with other Kihei members that I have yet to talk about. Overall, I really like Banzai. He is cool, and when I think of his design and his fighting style, I guess he was created with an idea of being cool. I'll give him A, like, you know, solid A. I have some issues with him, I will kinda repeat myself, but just like I don't like how Takasugi switched sides and was no longer antagonist, well, the same goes for Banzai. Also, does anyone remember that Banzai is supposed to be a producer for Otsu? I feel like nothing was ever done with that. I mean, of course, plot-wise it makes sense, right? Banzai had access to the media and could leak all that information to Takasugi, but I guess I wish we could see him in action at least once. Matako. And as I have said, Banzai was the last Kihei member that I like, and now we are moving on to Matako, and let me just start with a question for you, Hiroaki Sorachi. What the fuck is this character supposed to even be? You know what, I don't know how we all can be there and hate Sakura from Naruto when Matako exists. I'm legit curious, did Sorachi read or watch the first part of Naruto at the time and thought to himself that, you know what, like damn, that Sakura girl is so cool when she shouts Sasuke-kun every episode, I need a character like that in my manga right this moment. No, I talked some shit about Obi or Tetsu, but here I'm gonna say it. Matako is legit the worst character in the entire Gintama. How can you be a part of such a major group and yet be this useless? Irrelevant, like if she was gone, I assure you no one would notice. Her joke sucks, her personality sucks, nothing about this character is likable. You know, that's an F tier of course, and like the lowest of low F tier. You know, it's like almost offensive for Obi and Tetsu to be in the same tier with her. Takechi. Well, I'm not the biggest fan of the next character, but he's not as bad as Matako. Next up is Takechi, and you know, when I look at this list, I think his case is actually similar to Shinpachi. He kinda has the same issues. He has like two jokes, one that he's a feminist and two that he impersonates as Shinsuke sometimes. And just like with Shinpachi, at first those jokes were funny, then they kinda became annoying. I don't know, I'm gonna put him right next to Shinpachi actually. Honestly, I feel like he's kinda a case of a wasted potential, because Takechi never really does anything, does he? I don't remember him doing anything. There's that one scene during the very end of Gintama where he's like ready to die for Shinsuke, but I feel like that's all. Other than that, he's always in the background like doing nothing. He has strategies, but we never see him do anything like impressive. So yeah, I mean C tier, he's kinda whatever. And with Takechi out of the way, that would be it for the major villain group. And you know, I feel like doing a separate video about Kihei, because you know, there are a lot of things I would like to bring up, especially with Takasugi, but you know, none of that really matters that much if I am to rate those characters individually. I kinda want to talk about them more as a group rather than, you know, individual characters, but maybe later. Right now it wouldn't make much difference. Sakamoto. And that would be it for Kihentai. Now we are moving on to Sakamoto. I already kinda talked about him some time ago in one of my videos, and you know, I'm kinda gonna repeat what I have said in that video. I've always hated his role in Gintama's story because he never really does anything. Despite him being one of, you know, the big four. And yeah, sure, I mean, Katsura and Gintoki are also one of them and they are acting like complete idiots most of the time, but you know, that's actually kinda the thing. Sakamoto barely had a chance to act like an idiot, because he's gone for like 200 episodes, and by the time we get to see more of Sakamoto, we are already in the final arc. Like, we barely had a chance to see him, barely had a chance to get to know him, and yet suddenly he's supposed to be one of the most important characters in the whole universe. Basically what I'm trying to say is that Sakamoto never was explored enough as a character, for me obviously. And there is a reason it pisses me off so much, because Sakamoto used to be my favorite character, like legit top 1. When I first watched Gintama, I was waiting and waiting and waiting for him to appear again, and he never did. And by the time he finally showed up, you know, like 200 episodes later, after I have fallen in love with him, I kinda lost my interest. I still do think Sakamoto is a very funny character and, you know, a character that I really like, but as I have said, he used to be my favorite. His love is contagious and I still think he's funny, so he will make it to A tier. I kind of just can't bring myself to lower that score. I mean, you know, after all, he is a good character. If anything, I would love to put him higher, but that wouldn't make much sense considering the amount of issues I have with that character. So unfortunately, A is max for him. And I guess it's only kind of natural for me to say that the next character, which is Mutsu, shares the same issues as Sakamoto, which is kind of a shame because, you know, just like with Sakamoto, I really wish I could see more of her in those more comedic scenarios, not only in those final arcs during those serious arcs. But, you know, let's not repeat myself. I'll put her in B tier because I like her, but she shares all the same issues, just like Sakamoto. And those issues made me lower Sakamoto's score, so I'll do the same here. I mean, what a shame, really. She was kind of cool. Wish we could see more of her. And yeah, I mean, while we are at the topic of Mutsu, next one is Chidori Captain, you know, the one from her backstory. And I guess you, at this point, you know what I think of episodic antagonists. So, yep, another one of those. D tier. Fumiko. Next up, we have a character that, you know, kind of surprised me. I'm talking about Fumiko. I'm still surprised that she never showed up again after Renho arc. I mean, come on, she is a pretty decent character, and a big reason why I enjoy Renho arc so much is because of her. I also feel like she's the only female character that Sorachi used so much for sexual jokes, because, you know, there isn't really that much fanservice in Gintama with female characters. I would say there is more fanservice when it comes to male characters. I think we can all agree on that. So I think it was funny to see him cross that line for the first time, and I think that's gonna be B tier. I liked her, but, you know, she's gone after like 4 episodes, so I guess I just wish I could see more of her. And next up, well, another episodic antagonist, Dark Vader. We needed an antagonist, so we got one. I don't know, say what you want, I have something against those episodic antagonists, so, you know, I'll just move on. And yeah, that's D tier. Elizabeth. I guess we'll move on to a character from Renho race that is actually interesting, unlike Dark Vader. I guess we can all agree there is no such character like Elizabeth in any other series, right? In the first place, the idea on paper sounds trash when it comes to anime, you know, for a character that communicates only through text on his little cardboard sign. It sounds good for manga, you know, you're already reading it anyway, but for an anime adaptation, I'm surprised it works and that it works so well. Elizabeth is such a bizarre character, and making him Katsura's dual partner, I mean, okay, maybe him actually being Katsura's dual partner is just natural. Anyway, Elizabeth would definitely be in my top 10 characters. If I were to rate comedy and jokes only, I think that would easily be top 3, I think. Obviously, he's gonna end up in S tier. There are so many crazy jokes throughout the series with Elizabeth, and I actually think he might be one of the few characters that doesn't have his own recurring gag. I mean, not counting cardboard signs, of course, because that's not a gag, that's like part of his character, but he's literally one of the funniest characters in the whole Gintama, with a very unique approach to his jokes, especially playing around with his appearance. At some point, Sorachi just started doing whatever he wanted with Elizabeth, like, you know, I guess we all remember Dragonia, right? Like, what even was that? But moving on, that's easily S tier, Zura. But obviously, Elizabeth wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for his closest friend, Katsura. Remember how I said that Gintoki feels human and that's why he is the GOAT? Well, I feel the same about Katsura. His case is pretty similar, however the approach here is more humorous, I always felt like. On the surface, of course, he's a complete moron. He might be the actual dumbest character in the whole series, but inside he's one of few characters that consistently grow as we watch him. Not only during those serious arcs, like, you know, final arcs, but in some random individual episodes like the early ones with Ikumatsu, or the one with that interview with Hanano Ana, or even later when Hajime Saito was introduced for the first time. His view of revolution constantly changes, and I like how subtle Sorachi was with showcasing that. I really liked how, especially early on, the difference between a revolutionary like Katsura and an extremist like Takasugi was highlighted. Well, too bad nothing ever was done with all that growth and development, right? You know, I already made a video about it, and if you're interested, but Katsura is so forgotten later. There was so much setup between him and Takasugi, and I hate how nothing ever was done with it. I just wish we could see more of his serious side because, you know, most of the time he ends up looking like a complete goofball, and that would actually be a huge problem if it wasn't for me absolutely loving his character and jokes. I feel like I could go on about Katsura for hours, so let's actually stop here and get the rating. He goes into my top 5. Right next to Gintoki, and listen, I have said that the order in top 5 matters, but I honestly can't decide which one I like more. They're just equally great to me. And when they cooperate or have some episodes together, it doesn't matter if those are serious or comedic, that's like one of the best duos in any anime. Ikumatsu. And while at the topic of great duos, well, the next one is Ikumatsu. As a fun fact, let me just mention that Ikumatsu character is based on a real-life Katsura's wife. And while they aren't exactly lovers in Gintama, their relationship was very tactful and always thought it was a nice reference. Too bad Ikumatsu doesn't really appear that much in the show, but for what little screen time she has, her performance was good enough for her to end up in B tier. Her duo with Katsura was really great. Well, as for her actual husband, Daigo, which is next, well, I'll put him in extras. We don't really know anything about him. And you know, kinda the same could be said about Ikumatsu's brother-in-law. I mean, his initial appearance in the first episode with Ikumatsu would land him in D tier, but I kinda liked his role during the homeless arc, so, you know, I will force him into that C tier, but like low C tier. And to finish up the topic of Ikumatsu, next up is his father, Musashi. Remember that homeless guy? The goat himself. I mean, seriously, I always thought to myself, who the hell is this guy? He would appear pretty often as a simple gag, and the fact that even such a character as Musashi would receive a backstory and would be developed in any way, that's amazing. Let me keep it simple. I liked him as a comedy character and I think his backstory is pretty wholesome, so that's B tier. Hasegawa. And speaking of homeless people, it is time for Madao. I'm kinda excited for this one, not gonna lie, because to me Hasegawa is like Gintoki and Katsura when it comes to being human. Here it's done twice as good. You know, I'm actually gonna start by putting him on that list because let's not hide it anymore. Here's the thing. Hasegawa is my favorite character in the whole Gintama. Like, no joke, Kyuubei, Kagura, Gintoki and Katsura, they are all great, they truly are, but Hasegawa is just that guy. But for a pretty different reason. His character is just really sad when you think about it. But all that is camouflaged by all the jokes and comedy. But beneath all that, his story truly is just tragic. From being a head of immigration bureau all the way down to being homeless, poor and so on, you all know what I'm talking about. And the thing is, when you think about it, all that happened because he did the right thing and that caused him to lose everything. That's what's really sad and tragic about Hasegawa, because it doesn't happen just once at the beginning with Prince Hara, where he does the right thing and gets gravely punished by that. No, it happens constantly throughout the whole series. Hasegawa always ends up miserable, no matter what he does, like he's bound to fail. And the perfect proof of that is his relationship with Hatsu. It's actually really well written, in my eyes, because it is all about status, but not for them, but their family. But I guess I'll leave that topic for Hatsu, which is next, but continuing with Hasegawa, there is also one more thing that I really like about Hasegawa, that throughout the series, he had a chance to change his life multiple times, but usually he would sacrifice himself and that chance to help someone else. Like it is shown with Daigoro and his family, or in the episode parodying, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. There are tons of jokes regarding Hasegawa, his status, his tendencies and so on. I don't even know where to start. But as I have said, I think we can all see that beneath all that comedy there is a message. I think I really need to do a separate video about Hasegawa. There's just so much to cover and talk about. But yeah, I know, I'm like 2 hours in. I can't right now. Once again, he takes the top 1 spot. And as mentioned, the next one is Hatsu. And here I will expand on that, portrayal of their relationship with Hasegawa. Hatsu is just a great representation of political marriage, but I mean kinda, because she's of a high status while Hasegawa comes from a poor samurai family. But as a head of Immigration Bureau, that didn't matter much. Until he wasn't, of course. And the public image in Japan back then was, I think still is, a great deal. So after losing that position, they couldn't really stay together, as to not bring shame to the Hasegawa family. I think Hatsu kinda completes Hasegawa's character and I will throw her into B tier. Even though she individually wasn't the most unique character, I really like how their relationship was handled, so B tier seems fine. Actually, the same could be said about Daigoro, the kid that took Hasegawa in and took care of him, I guess, more or less. Anyway, that's also B tier. Great episode, really funny, and his character also just adds to Hasegawa as a whole. Prince Hara. And speaking of funny episodes, man, why did they cut Prince Hara's screen time so much? He's such an icon when you think of those very first Gintama episodes. He's in every other episode. And later when Gintama keeps on introducing those new characters, he kinda stops showing up. I'll be honest, his part of the plot during the Silver Soul arc is kinda whatever. I didn't really care that much about that whole reveal. Prince Hara was never trying to be serious. I don't think he ever had a single serious episode outside of final arcs. So that whole background reveal kinda, I don't know, it always kinda felt forced to me. In my eyes, Hara is and always was a comedy character and nothing more. Because of that, I will put him in B. I wish he had more interactions with other characters, because I think he always dealt with either Hasegawa or Yorozuya and no one else. I mean, of course, outside of Silver Soul Arc, where he is with Elizabeth, Katsura and everyone else. As for his butler, G, I think this is the same case as Kozenigata and Haji. He exists so that Prince Hara has a partner and sets up some jokes for him. Nothing special about him individually, but it's not like I dislike him. I will throw him into C tier. You know, it's kind of Prince Hara and G are, you know, their case is kind of similar to Kozenigata and Haji, so I guess it makes sense for their rating to be the same. Tsukuyo. Anyway, now we're moving on to characters from Yoshiwara, and let's start with Tsukuyo. Is there anyone who doesn't like Tsukuyo? To me, she was always like a female Gintoki kinda. Not as good obviously, but you know, there was an attempt. I am a big fan of how her character was handled. She's like the most obvious love interest for Gintoki in the series, and you know, I always liked the relationship. It was handled pretty nicely, especially during that arc with Jiraiya. And you know, speaking of Jiraiya, when I said that she's kind of like a female Gintoki, it was obviously because of her relationship with her master and how later he ends up as a bad guy. That heavily reminds me of what happened with Soyo and later Utsuro. But overall, I think we can all agree Tsukuyo doesn't have many issues overall. It is a nicely written character, and you know, that's exactly it. I think she is a good character, she is easily likable, but I don't think she is S tier. Like, I don't know, it's like something is missing. I'll put her in A, I think she is great. Maybe later I will change that to S, I'll think about it. But as for now, she's A. Anyway, moving on to another character from Yoshiwara, now we have Hinova, and as for her, I don't really remember that much of her outside of Yoshiwara and Flames arc. Like, does she ever do anything after that? I don't think so. To be honest, I don't even remember that much of her during the Yoshiwara and Flames arc. Obviously her role is important, and I guess I liked her, and I liked her relationship with Hosen, but I don't remember that much about her, you know? I'll throw her into C, just she's kind of whatever. It's not like I hate her, but I don't have anything to like her for, so just C. As for the next one, Suzuran, well, that's extras. I don't remember her either, you know, like I remember her, but I don't remember her having a single line of dialogue actually. I think she is just kind of there, you know. So I mean, that's extras. As for Seita, which is next, I'll be honest, I don't like him. He has quite a lot of screen time, but I think he's pretty boring. In general, in Gintama there are not many children characters, and I kind of get it why. I mean, Gintama humor is pretty unhinged, so you know, it would be weird. I mean, that kind of humor would be weird combination with children characters, so I get it why there are not so many of them. I'll put him in D because I think he's pretty boring. There are only 2 characters left when it comes to Yoshiwara, and well, next one is Jiraiya, and you know how it is with those episodic villains, right? Especially on this list. Well, not quite. Here's the thing. Jiraiya is the perfect example that it is indeed possible to create an episodic antagonist that is interesting, that has a nice backstory, that is in some way connected with characters that we already know so much, without it feeling unnatural or, you know, that it comes out of nowhere. Even though he's there for like 3 episodes total, I think, that's enough for us to get to know him, his ideals, you know, it's enough to create that emotional weight. Jiraiya is a living proof that writing an interesting episodic antagonist is possible, and I wish we had more of them in the series. I'm going to put him in A tier because I think that his whole backstory, his background, his fight with Gintoki, his relationship with Tsukuyo that I mentioned before, in the grand scheme of things, like, this arc doesn't feel that important at all. But it works wonders to develop characters that we already know so much about. Like, that arc is around episode 200, if I remember correctly. And I feel that when you watch it, it feels as if you have just discovered a different side of Gintoki, even though you watched him for 200 episodes already. And Jiraiya is the reason why you were able to witness that side of Gintoki in the first place. That's easy A tier, and he really was a great antagonist. And to finish the topic of Yoshiwara, there is only one guy left, and you know, it's Hosen, and well, you know how it is with those episodic villains, right? Well, again, you know, just like with Jiraiya, Hosen isn't really episodic. I think he had twice the screen time that Jiraiya had, and I think his relationship with Hinova was actually interesting. You know, I actually remember more of his side when it comes to that relationship. I mentioned it when I was rating Hinova, but you know, I don't really remember that much from Hinova perspective. Overall, he's not quite there with Jiraiya, but I still think he's solid. I think he's solid, and his rating will be a solid B tier. Kamui. Well, okay, I guess there's actually one more antagonist connected with Yoshiwara, but he isn't really a character from Yoshiwara, and that's Kamui. Here's the thing, I was always surprised he made such a huge impact on the fandom, you know? I think he was in like top 6 or 5 in the viewer popularity pool after the Yoshiwara and Flames arc. As for me, I think I was never really impressed by him. Obviously, I mean, he's alright, but I don't like what his character ends up being during the finale. He was still fine to me during the Shogun assassination arc, especially his fight with Kagura, but after that I kind of felt like Sorachi wasn't 100% certain what to do with him next. At least those were my impressions. What I also disliked about him was how his fight with Umibozu went down. I was actually looking forward to it, and then Umibozu, you know, showed up half dead, and Gintoki was the one to finish the fight, or I think... But if I remember correctly, Gintoki's fight with Kamui was also in Raptor or something. I don't know, his character was all over the place for me, not to mention his kind of character is just not my favorite type. I'm gonna throw him into C, it's not like I hate him, I think my expectations were just different when it comes to him. He is still alright though, it's just that I'm not the biggest fan. Abuto. As for his closest friend, I guess we could call it that way, Abuto. Abuto is just a really cool guy, you know? Laid back, he doesn't really have real enemies, he doesn't hold any grudge towards his opponents. He's the type of guy that would rather be somewhere else and do something else than be part of this whole ordeal between Kiheitai and Shogunate. I'll give him B just because I like him as a character. As for Kamui's second best friend, which is Ungyu, which is next, well, he died before he had a chance to do anything, so extras. And by the way, obviously I know they are not the best friends, don't worry. Harusame Fraction. Anyway, moving on, next up we have Harusame Pirates in general. You know, before I start, I have a question. Am I the only one that thinks their whole fraction is kind of irrelevant throughout the entire story? I mean, they're always there, they're always mentioned, they're always there in the background. But, you know, I feel like they're introduced pretty early in like episode 10 even or something. And by the end of the series, they just serve as a fodder enemy so that you know, good guys just have someone to fight against. And it pretty much goes for every single Harusame character, especially captains. I mean, you had over 300 episodes to develop that fraction and nothing was really done with it. I think I'm gonna throw them all into D tier along with Harusame Elders. I guess some of you may ask, you know, like, what about their fights with the main cast toward the end? Don't you remember that fight with Katsura and the monkey guy? And you know what? I do remember that fight. That episode, for example, it wasn't good because of that monkey guy. No, it was because of Katsura. You know, he was the one that made the episode good. And it pretty much goes for every single fight on that Yarrow planet. You know, the fight with Gintoki and that eye guy, and you know, with the Pakuyasa backstory. Same goes for that Sakamoto fight with that AI guy or whatever his name was. They were just created so that, you know, that our cast have someone to fight against. At least that were my impressions, you know, that, you know, they were created so Gintoki, Katsura and Sakamoto have fight someone who has a name and some kind of unique design, not just some random background character. Umibozu. And speaking of unique design, you know what? With Umibozu, which is next, Sorachi really got me there. He seriously introduced a character that looks like a total unit, you know, he's called like an alien buster or someone, you know, like the strongest in the entire universe. Only for him to take off his mask and make everyone around laugh because he's balding and, you know, force that joke every time he was mentioned or showed up. Like this right here is the essence. Like the very essence of Gintama. But I'll be straight with you, I love Umibozu. That's an S tier, easily. He's one of the few characters that I am actually satisfied when it comes to his role in the final arcs. And it was really cool that he was the one to fight and almost kill Utsuro, a one-on-one. Like throughout the whole story before Utsuro was introduced, I think he was arguably the strongest character in the entire cast. You know, the strongest that we knew of. So he earned that fight and I'm really glad it happened, and Sorachi didn't forget about Umibozu's role during finale. Kouka. As for Umibozu's wife, Kouka, which is next, you know, I might be completely wrong here, but isn't Kagura's mother like the only character that we see only in flashback and is relevant to the actual plot of Gintama? I guess Soyo is there as well, but you know, there is also Utsuro, so it's not really the same. I think she's a nice addition to the story, and to be honest, I never expected a character to be introduced like that. She was mentioned a couple of times, but I always thought she would end up, you know, sidelined, like Shinpachi's father, for example. I'll put her in B. Also, as a little fun fact, you probably know it, but she and Kagura have the same voice actor. Tendoshu. You know, I kinda like how I just said that Sorachi didn't forget Umibozu's role during the finale, because we are just moving to Tendoshu. And like, where to even start? Like, can someone explain to me what the hell is the point of Tendoshu? Like, since the beginning, Tendoshu were supposed to be this super powerful group that controls Bakufu, like, they are the true decision makers here, you know? Nothing goes past them, they are the reason Earth lost to Amanto and so on and so forth. Now, please tell me, what did Tendoshu do throughout those almost 400 episodes? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I was waiting the entire time for them to finally become relevant, to finally live up to their title of, you know, Earth Conquerors or whatever, just to see them never do anything and die off screen, kinda. Throughout the series they would show up from time to time and I would be like, oh shit, you know, that's Tendoshu. And now I feel stupid when I think about it. You know, Tendoshu, they all go to F tier. I feel like they should have a separate tier. Like, that's how terrible they are. And to be honest, I see who's next, and you know, we have all those Altana Liberation Army leaders and whatnot, you know, like Shinjaku, that other guy, and those antagonists that Kagura and Gintoki were fighting against on Earth. They are also terrible. Like, I'm gonna put all of them, like literally all of them, in D. Like, you know, to me they were always just so boring. We have all those amazing characters working together at the very end of the series, right? You know, Takasugi and Katsura fighting alongside each other, with Sakamoto bugging them up. Yorozuya and the whole Edo, like the whole cast, joins forces to defend their beloved Kabukicho. And their enemies are just a bunch of random ass shitters. I really wish that aside from Utsuro, we would have more meaningful enemies at the end. And you know, I thought Tendoshu would end up being more meaningful, but we know how it ends up. I guess Sorachi really was trying to do something more with Shinjaku and that other guy, but I don't know, to me they were super boring, like crazy boring. And but you know what? I changed my mind. I'll put them in F tier. Like, they were horrible. I can't pretend. Like, they were just horrible. I'll put them in F. That's funny, because speaking of terrible characters, Hitsugi. Trust me when I say this, if Matako wouldn't be on this list, then Hitsugi would be my most hated character. So I guess congrats Hitsugi, you're number 2. I don't see any reason for this character to even exist. Like, seriously, what was the point of his existence? I mean it, release a Gintama with all of his scenes taken out and no one will notice. That's how irrelevant that guy is. Oboro. Then we have Oboro, obviously he's more relevant than Hitsugi, but I have a very mixed feelings about Oboro. At first, I really liked him. Him randomly showing up during the Courtesan of the Nation arc was like, no, it was so crazy, so out of nowhere, unexpected and so on. But the issue is, he really overstayed his welcome, didn't he? The more was revealed about him, the more I started to lose my interest in him, to the point that I completely stopped caring about him. It just felt like with each next arc he was like a completely different character, which bothered me. I don't mind characters getting developed and growing, but it just didn't work for me with Oboro. I will go with C tier, but like, you know, like high C tier. He almost made it to B. At the end of the day, I just don't like him, but neither do I dislike him. He's just in that weird spot where I know he could be much higher on this list, but something is just missing. Yoshida Shoyo. And now we are at the very end of this list and we have only 2 characters left, or you know, more like 1 character left. First I'll go with Shoyo. I think we can all agree this character was created with a thought of being likable, right? Like, every time he is mentioned or any time he's on screen, he just radiates with good vibes, you know? And I mean, Sorachi did succeed with it. He will end up in B tier, but let's be honest, everyone was interested more in that other Shoyo. I mean, Utsuro, of course. The very last character on this list. I think this is gonna be the toughest character to rate. I am torn between I love him and I hate him. Here's the thing, I'm overall not really that satisfied with Gintama's final plot, as you can probably tell by now. I'm not that much into the whole deal with Altana, into that whole idea of destroying the whole universe just to die, you know. To me that always seems too generic for a series like Gintama, where everything is backwards, you know. Sorachi does everything to avoid boring tropes and overused themes. I mean, at least in my eyes, of course. Gintama was always trying to be unique, or maybe not trying, I don't like the word here. I think Gintama in general is very unique, and I always felt that wasn't intentional, you know. I always felt like it's not like Sorachi sat down and in each chapter forced himself to find, you know, like unique solutions, to create unique jokes, or to come up with unique characters. It always felt natural rather than, you know, forced. And I guess that's just how Sorachi is, that's just his sense of humor, that's just how he views some situations in life. So obviously, characters created by him are gonna, you know, reflect him more or less. And I guess that's why characters in Gintama don't always make the right choice or say the right thing. And that kind of reminds me of how Sorachi once responded to a complaint about Gintama that supposedly was pretty popular in Japan back in the day, but you know, I can't really confirm that. The complaint was that characters in Gintama were losers pretty much. So why would anyone want to follow their story of, you know, being lazy, being addicted to gambling, being selfish, and so on, and you know that those characters would never really try to fix themselves, so why would anyone want to, you know, like follow them? And Sorachi's answer was that he never set out to write losers, that some people even told him that, you know, he is a loser, so maybe that's why his characters act like one. And I think that's the reason Gintama is unique, because he isn't scared of writing characters that are imperfect, full of flaws, or have some kind of addiction like, you know, drinking or gambling or both. And you know, I already talked about it with Gintoki, Hasegawa, Katsura, and a bunch of other characters. And of course, I don't mean that Gintama is the only manga that has those imperfect characters, but only in Gintama it feels like there are much more imperfect characters than those perfect ones. And with all that being said, it's weird to me that Sorachi maintained that, you know, uniqueness throughout so many chapters, yet the final villain and his master plan seems just so generic. But what I'm getting at, despite all I have said, after all, Utsuro is a Gintama character, and there is one thing that would seem impossible in most shonens. Because of who Utsuro is, right? Because of his relationships with Gintoki, Oboro, Nobume, and tons of other characters, there is always tension when he is on screen. There is always that emotional weight in the air, there are always stakes, and I think that perfectly captures his persona as the main villain of Gintama. You obviously know this, but Gintama doesn't need any crazy power systems or final forms or whatever. If there is emotional weight, tension between characters, or you know, they have some crazy past together, that's enough to make encounters between those characters exciting. So after all, I think there is uniqueness in Utsuro being generic. And maybe I wasn't impressed by his motives, maybe I wasn't impressed by the final arc plot in general, but yet still the thrill was there every time Utsuro showed up. And I think that's what matters the most if we are talking about the very main villain, a final boss himself. As for his placement on this list though, you know, if I had a tier between A and S, I would put him there, but I don't have one, so I'll put him in A tier, like A plus tier. I may not be his biggest fan, but at the end of the day, I do believe that he gets the job done. I guess his case is kinda similar to Takasugi, you know, like we can all agree he is a nicely written character. Like, it doesn't matter where he's placed, it doesn't matter that he's an A or A plus or S tier, right? We all know that they both are great characters. And being A or S tier doesn't matter. On paper, they are still great. And you know, it's kind of funny speaking about all those A tiers, A plus tiers, S tiers or whatnot. Because, you know, I just spent ages talking about Utsuro, the literal final villain, just to place him in the same tier with characters like Mother, for example. But I mean, that's inevitable. If we are rating all characters based on mainly if I like them or if I don't like them, that's just how it's gonna be. Like, I swear some people are gonna be pissed when they see this list, but well, whatever, that's my list. Anyway, here is the full list, from characters I struggled with to the ones that completely define what Gintama is at its best. Let's just say the obvious at the end. This series has one of the most unique casts out there, and honestly, the more you watch it, the more your rating starts to change, and I can see it clearly on this list. Characters I didn't like or care about at first suddenly become some of my favorite, and that's the part of what makes Gintama so special. Also, I have actually added the tier for Tendoshu as promised, and I was thinking of making some final changes like with Takasugi or Tsukuyo and moving them to S. I also thought of moving Kamui and Oboro to B tier, but I have decided to keep it that way for now. That's just how I feel currently. Remember, this list is very based, it purely reflects my personal opinion, and if I like the character, it has nothing to do with being relevant to Gintama's plot or anything. I mean, otherwise obviously Mother wouldn't be in A tier, right? Or Hasegawa wouldn't be in top tier. But let me know who would be in your top tier or who would be in your F tier. Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe for more Gintama content. And if you have for whatever reason watched the whole thing, thank you. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.